You've finally decided you want your own custom avatar for VRChat. And most of the guides online are outdated, only for VROID models or other random programs for making a character that you then convert for VRChat use. The two main avatar types everyone's familiar with are booth models and kit-bashed Gumroad/payhip models. In other words, Eastern and Western models. This guide is specifically on the Western style models, where to get the assets, how to combine them, and how to use the basics of Blender and Unity to get your model into VRChat. This will be separated into two parts, where the first part is all of Blender and the second part is all of Unity. I do want to preface that I've been making custom commissions for people for more than a year, and as such have set up a rhythm to make models fast and efficient. I might go over something too fast in this guide, so if you end up needing more help, please feel free to ask more questions in the help section of my Discord server. To get started, you will need Blender, Cat's plugin, and optionally robust weight transfer, which I go on later explaining what that actually does. To install the Cat's Blender plugin, you'll click on the releases, scroll down, and click on the zip file to download it. In Blender, you'll click on Edit and Preferences. Click on Install and look for that zip file. You do not have to extract it. Double-click the Cat's Blender plugin zip file, and then make sure you hit the check mark to enable it. And now we're ready to get started. So the first place you want to go to is Jinxy. That's JINXXY.com. Not two N's, two X's. I still mess that up. If there's anything I recommend you buying, it's going to be a body and a head. There's a lot of free ones you can get, but to avoid any sculpting that you don't want to do yet as a beginner, I recommend you buy a base like Zinfit or Panda Bear's base. There's a few others out there that are really popular as well. And then you can buy clothes that are already shaped to that base, and then you don't have to do any sculpting. Panda did rework their base to a version 2 that is not shaped the same as version 1. So now all of the clothes that you're going to find for this base are not going to be for V2, they're most likely going to be for V1. If you do really like Panda's base over Zinpia's base, personally I find the tracking a lot better on Panda's base, then I recommend you buy V2 and then message Panda in their server to get the V1, so that way you don't have to do any shaping. Maybe later you do learn the shaping and you upgrade to V2, but purely to avoid any sculpting, I really recommend using Zinpia's base or Panda Bear's base. If you don't want to go through that whole process of getting the V1, you can just do the Zinpia base. But again, there are a bunch of free bases online. At the very least, try buying a base and then you could use a free head. There are a few good free heads out there. So once I pick a base out, then I'm going to click on the clothing tab and I can filter the price to max 0, so it's only going to show me free stuff. And then I'm going to scroll through the pages until I find something that I like. I'm going to put Zinfit in the search bar, so it only shows me things that are rigged to Zinfit. As long as you check the description box, most likely in the description of the assets, the creators put rigged to Zinfit base or rigged to Panda base. So if you type Panda or you type Zinfit in the clothing section with the 0 price, you'll most likely get clothes that are ready to go. You just download them and then you import them. So I'm just scrolling through all of these pages until I find something that I like that's free. I could make it easy and just get a single bodysuit or something, but I'm looking for a shirt, shorts, shoes, maybe some socks. I would say at this stage, you find something that is kind of what you're looking for. Don't set your sights too high because these are free assets, and while there are a bunch, you might not find exactly what you're looking for. So just kind of scroll through and click on something that seems good rather than look for exactly what you're wanting. If you were trying to find something specific, you're most likely going to have to pay for it. So now I'm going to start with exporting all of the zip files, RAR files, just so I can get it clean and ready to go. Because if you try to import the files while they're still in the RAR file specifically, it won't read the RAR files and there won't be anything in there. It does read it for the zip files, but you could end up importing the wrong FBX. So better safe than sorry, just go ahead and export all of the files and get it ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to look for is the body. I'm so sorry, I said Zinfit earlier. I did end up going with Pandabase. So you want to go ahead and import the body. You can add the textures in Blender. It really doesn't matter. I'm kind of messy and I don't really care. And then I'm going to import the head. These are not going to be lined up yet. As you can see, it's too low. So I'm going to hit G and then I'm going to hit Z to raise it up. This keeps it on the Z scale. And then to move it forward, I'm going to hit G and then Y and move my mouse. And I'm going to keep doing that until I get it in the right spot. Once I've got it in the right spot, I'm going to make sure only merge all bones is checked. This isn't super necessary for the body and head specifically, but it's a good rule of thumb to uncheck everything, but only check merge all bones. Make sure the body is in the base and then the to merge is the head. And that'll go for everything you add in the future. The new thing that you add is going to be in the to merge. Once I join them, you'll see that you only have one armature now, and as a second good rule of thumb, you want to go into pose mode and pose everything after you add it. This will make sure that you have everything properly added before you move on to the next thing. Now I'm going to look for the outfit. I downloaded this outfit, but I actually only wanted the shirt, so I'm going to delete the rest. Now I have a lot of bones here, and I personally like to delete all of the bones for the clothes that I add. As long as there's no straps or anything that move on the bones for the clothes, there's no reason to keep all of the bones there. The reason I'm deleting the bones is because if I didn't, as you can see here, the twist bones are actually named differently from the body that I have. But wrist underscore twist dot L versus underscore L will cause me to have two twist bones. And that's an issue because when the twist bone moves, only one of them is going to move. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of the bones on the shirt armature, select merge all bones, because if you didn't, in this case, if you didn't select merge all bones, it would ask you, okay, what bone do you want to parent it to then? So you select merge all bones so it doesn't ask you that. And now, of course, after merging the armatures, I'm going to go into pose mode and make sure the shirt moves. Sometimes there's clipping. As you can see here, there is. It doesn't matter anyway. We're just going to delete all of the vertex groups. And then you click on the wrench, add a modifier, and go to data transfer. Follow all of this as I'm showing you here. Select the body as the source. Check vertex data. Click on vertex groups. Generate data and then apply it. And now I'm going to move it all again, and as you can see here with the boob bone, I'm moving it again. There is some clipping, but we are going to create a blend shape to avoid all of that clipping, and I'll show you that later. The point is that the clipping is not nearly as bad as it was 30 seconds prior. Now I'm going to add the skirt that I chose. It's not in the right spot whatsoever, even though it did say it was rigged to panda base. My guess it was rigged to the heel base versus flat foot base could end up being in the wrong spot. So I'm just going to press G and then Z to move it up into the correct spot. I'm going to make sure the underwear is lined up properly because that's usually a better tell than the waist. Now, as you can see, there's some clipping with the shirt. We're going to create a blend shape for that as well. There was no rigging on the skirt here, as in some skirts, the skirt does move. It does have physics to it. A lot of free skirts do not have any rigging. It's fine, especially in this case. I think personally, if a skirt is really short, then you don't need physics. As you can see, there's only the hip bone, the leg bone, the butt bone. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all of the bones on the skirt because we already have all of those bones for the body. And then I'm gonna make sure merge all bones is selected and then merge the armatures. Now we're gonna go in pose mode and make sure that the skirt moves with the body. There is some clipping when I move the spine down, so we're gonna go ahead and do a data transfer there to fix that. So where it says the body, vertex data, vertex groups, generate data layers, and then apply. Data transfers are going to be your best friend for what we're doing here. I'm going to move the spine again. There's minimal clipping. I think the weird mesh fracturing, whatever you want to call that, is an issue with the skirt. When I move the leg down, you can see a huge dip in the leg. There's a sharp curve in the skirt because the leg is bending. That is Blender's built-in data transfer. I do want to quickly go over robust weight transfer. If I were to use that instead of the built-in data transfer, you can see me applying it here. If I go back into pose mode and move the leg, the skirt is now weight painted a lot smoother, and it is not creating that sharp dip. I'm not going to go over how to add robust weight transfer in this, since I want to keep it as simple as possible. If that's something you're not comfortable with using yet, or even at all, then don't worry about it. The data transfer is fine, and you can manually go in and weight paint it yourself if you want it cleaner. But robust weight transfer is really great, and I do have a TikTok detailing more on it. Now that I've got the skirt added properly, I want to go ahead and go over the shape key to make the shirt not clip with the skirt. Click on the shirt and then click on the triangle. I'm going to hit the plus on the shape key twice. You need a basis, and then the second one you create is going to be key 1. I'm going to name that to skirt. If I were to create a toggle for this, I would look for every mesh called skirt on, however you want it. And I'm going to turn that on when the skirt toggle is on. So that's why I'm naming it skirt, but you could technically name it anything you want. You could just sculpt it so that way it doesn't clip through the skirt permanently. But if you wanted it to toggle, and say you wanted some just underwear underneath the skirt and you wanted to toggle the skirt on and off, it's better to use a shape key so that way it's not a permanent modification in the mesh that you're doing. Shape keys are non-destructible. Once I name it, I'm going to change the value to 1 and then go into sculpt mode. The proper way to do this is in edit mode, but I don't think that's as beginner friendly as sculpt mode. So I'm just going to turn the radius up in sculpt mode. It's already going to be selecting the top left option, which is the one we want, and then I'm going to click on the parts that are clipping. It pulls it out. I'm just going to do that everywhere it's clipping, so now the top will be outside of the skirt. Now it looks correct, and then if we were to mess with the value, if I set it back to 0, the clipping returns. So what we're doing is in Unity, we're going to set that value to 1 permanently without a toggle at least, so that way it doesn't clip. But if we ever wanted to toggle the skirt off, the value would go back to 0. This asset creator did name their skirt body, so that I don't want the skirt to be called body.001, so I'm going to name it properly to skirt. And this goes for every mesh. It's really better to name it all properly. Next, I went to add the hoodie. And even though it said it was rigged to panda base, it was not lined up correctly. It's in T-pose instead of A-pose. There's no rigging, so you can't pull the bones down. This is definitely doable, and is probably actually for the Panda base V2. As I described earlier, Panda updated the base, so it's in T-pose now, and more up to 2024 VRChat standards. But with how much work you would have to do here to get this hoodie working for this base, it's better to just delete it and find something different. This is something I did a lot when I first started. If there was anything I didn't understand enough, or a quick Google didn't tell me what I needed to know within a few minutes, I just deleted it and moved on. And that is perfectly okay. You're most likely doing this for an avatar for yourself, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect. If it's something beyond your skill level, do not be afraid to just delete it and find a different asset that works better for you. It took me a long time to even figure out how to data transfer, so I would find clothes that didn't have bones, and I blamed the asset creator, like, why didn't you even rig this? But it's because you're supposed to do a data transfer, and that took me a long time to learn. So there's gonna be a lot in this process that takes you a long time to learn. If I remember correctly, the t-shirt didn't really work with it as well as I wanted, so I ended up deleting the t-shirt and swapping to the tank top. So this is another scenario where when I imported it, it was below the body, so I hit G and then I hit Z to keep it on the Z scale, and I moved it up to line it up. I'm deleting all of the bones because there's no extra fizz bones that are needed for the clothing to work, because I'm going to do a data transfer. I merge the armatures and test the arm bones to make sure everything moves properly. I was still trying to get the t-shirt to work at this point, but even if I did get it to work, I think with a higher neckline on the shirt, it just wouldn't have worked. So that's when I just decided to delete it. So with the tank top added, I tested the bones, and of course there was clipping in the boobs. So in this case, I'm gonna do another robust weight transfer instead of a data transfer. Again, those are the same things, just the robust weight transfer is not Blender's built-in data transfer. And I'm gonna test the boob bone. The weight painting is a lot cleaner. It's also a good habit to test as many bones as possible. Sometimes it'll seem like everything's fine, and then you'll move the thumb, and the thumb has a lot of clipping with the shirt. Now, since I deleted the t-shirt and I switched to the tank top, there is a new clipping in the skirt. Instead of the shirt going over the skirt, I wanted the skirt to go over the tank top, so the tank top would be tucked in. So I'm going to create a shape key on the skirt now, and I'm going to name it tank top. And now with the value on again, I'm going to go to sculpt mode and then click on the parts that are clipping, so that way it goes over the tank top. And now it looks like the tank top is tucked into the skirt. I was originally going to just delete the part with the t-shirt. Now if you have the shape key enabled and you go into pose mode, when you go into pose mode, the shape key will disable. So I'm going to, in pose mode, bend the model to the side, and then I'm going to go back and re-enable the shape key. There is some clipping that I think needs fixed still, so in sculpt mode I'm going to fix it while it's still posed, and then I click on pose mode again twice to return it back to its original A pose. Now I'm going to add the socks. These are my favorite socks. I use these free socks regularly to this day. They're quality thigh-high socks that I recommend you get added to your library even if you're not going to use them, because they're a great asset to have. When I bend the leg here, you can see the sock does have clipping. Here you have two options. First, we can do a shape key to make the leg underneath the sock not clip. And instead of sculpt mode here, we're going to try edit mode. If this method ends up being too difficult for you, you can just delete the mesh underneath, and I'll show you that method as well. Just keep in mind that that method is not undoable, it's permanent. I don't think I said that right. So I'm going to create the shape key, set the value to on, and instead of going into sculpt mode, I'm going to go into edit mode. So I'm going to select everything underneath the sock except for the feet. I deselect the feet. You don't want to select anything that ends up being a complicated mesh, because this method that we're doing will invert it. Make sure this button at the top is not selected, so it's gray instead of blue. And then I'm going to hit Alt and S at the same time and move my mouse down. Now with the legs done, I'm going to do the feet individually, and I'm not going to use Alt+S here. Now with swapping the value to 0 and 1, you can see that the legs get heavily morphed underneath the sock. Doesn't matter, you're not going to see it anyway. And that's what will prevent the clipping. If that was too difficult for you, but you do want to use the shape keys, the important part is the knees. So I could just do the Alt+S method on the knee part and then leave the feet alone. Most of the clipping in an avatar is going to be at the knees and elbows. The second method is to go into edit mode. No shape key needed, and you're just going to delete the mesh underneath the sock. Now, as you can see, if I were to delete the sock, there are no legs underneath. This is completely valid, and especially if you were to give away a free or a public avatar, you generally want to do this to keep to the asset creator's TOS. But if it was your personal avatar, maybe someday down the road you don't like the socks and you want to delete them. Well, you destroyed the legs underneath, so now you have to re-add the body, and it ends up being a huge pain. So it's better safe than sorry, especially if you are as impulsive as I am with swapping outfits. It's better to keep the legs underneath just in case you ever want to remove them. And especially if you wanted to create a toggle for the socks later on too. But if it's not on your skill level, totally okay, just delete the legs underneath, who cares? You can figure all that out later. Now with the shape key added, I'm going to go into pose mode. You can see that the clipping is there because the shape key does not stay on whenever I go into pose mode. So I'm going to pose it first and then go back and set the value to 1. In that leg pose, there is now no clipping. Now we're gonna add the hair. The hair is way off. It was really high. This is not an issue with the asset creator or anything like that. You don't need to find hair that's rigged to a base or a head. None of that matters. It's super easy to move it into the correct spot. You could even add hair in Unity if you wanted to do it that way. You would just drag the hair onto the head bone. I'm gonna set the color here. This is not important and has no actual effect on your model, but the bright pink purple missing shader is kind of an eyesore for me, so I'm just set a basic color to get an idea of what it might look like later. So now I'm gonna click on the armature. This is something I didn't mention earlier, but you need to make sure you click on the armature rather than the mesh. If I were to just click on the mesh and move it down, the armature will not move with it, and then your armature is not gonna be lined up with your hair. And this is extremely important because if I were to add fizz bones later, with the hair bones armature really high up, when the fizz bones move, they're not going to move at all in the correct spot. It's going to fly up really high because it's going to try to connect with the fizz bones that are 2 feet in the air. So make sure you click on the armature and move it, but not the hair mesh. You'll know you got it correct because the bones will turn orange rather than the hair mesh turning orange. There is some clipping on the sides. The head is a lot wider than the hair. The same way I prevented the clipping with the shirt and the skirt, I just went into sculpt mode and I pulled the hair out. I did add the textures in here just so it's not as such of an eyesore, but again, this is super not needed at all. You do not have to do that. I think we're all done here. I've got a skirt, shirt, an extra hoodie, sweater, top. I've got a hoodie, a shirt, skirt, socks, hair. I feel like I've got all the basics. You know, she's not naked. I'm just gonna do some extra posing here to make sure I didn't miss anything. And as I mentioned before, the elbows and the knees are the most guaranteed spots to have clipping. So when I moved the arm, you could see the clipping in the hoodie. So I'm going to create a shape key now the same way I made a shape key for the socks. We're gonna do that for the elbows now. So I'm gonna make a shape key on the body, set the value to 1, go into edit mode and select the part of the mesh that has the clipping, in this case only the elbows, and then I'm going to Alt and S at the same time to scale it down. I could do the entire arm, but it's not important. Actually, I didn't mention this because it wasn't relevant in this model that I created, but the third most often place you'll find clipping is in the armpits. When the arms go down, the shirt will generally clip into the chest and you'll have clipping in the armpit. So you might check there and see if you need to create a shape key or delete the vertices underneath there as well. The eye tracking section is part of cats and is what's needed to make your avatar blink and eyes move up, down, left, and right. So make sure the left and right eye bones are IL and IR. The mesh is body. And the head is set to the head bone. The blink left and blink right will almost never be set correctly, so I'm going to select whatever the head's blink left, blink right is called. With almost every head, it's going to be something different. It might be blink L, blink R, blink left, blink right. In this case, it's I blink left, I blink right. So it's almost always going to be different. Just look for something like that. And then for Visemes, this generally will be filled in, but you need to make sure the Visemes say ah, o, and ch. And then you create the Visemes. That'll take a few seconds. Now I'm gonna add the tail and the ears. So the hair, tail, ears, and a few other things you do not want to have merge all bones selected. I think I did leave it selected for the hair, but luckily didn't run into any issues. But let's say the tail and the ears were both from 2 different people and the tail was called bone. Like sometimes the base bone is just called bone. And then let's say the hair bone's base bone was also called bone. That would combine them both and it would completely break the fizz bones. The tail might move in the same, the tail might end up being connected to the hair bone because they're both called bone. That's what will happen if you leave merge all bones selected. So unselect it for things like this, and then it'll end up changing the name to bone.001. That's getting into the really detailed information, but the important part, tail, ears, hair, do not check merge all bones. After scaling it with S to the correct size that I personally want, and G and Z to move it up to the hip, to the tailbone, of course. Now with merge all bones deselected, I need to click on the attach portion and find the hips. I'm going to attach the tailbone to the hip bone. I would do the same for the hair. If it didn't come with a head bone, I would attach it to the head bone, and I would attach the ears to the head bone. I didn't go into pose mode here and make sure it moved correctly, but please make that as much of a habit as you can. Go into pose mode and make sure it moves correctly. I imported the ears, aligned them up into the correct spot. With merge all bones not selected, I'm gonna go ahead and merge armatures. We're now done with the blender portion, and I'm satisfied with it. As long as your body is named body, make sure your head and your body are combined into the same mesh, unless you specifically didn't want it to be. But you'll export it. Now, I'm not really sure why this could end up being something that's kind of outdated, but the path mode needs to be set to copy. That was from the tutorial that I learned from, 2 years ago, and I've done it ever since. I don't really know why you need to do it, but, I've done it, so do it. I don't know. If you want to let me know in comments if that's needed anymore, or if it is needed, what it's needed for. I would love to know that information. But yeah, set it to copy. Find the spot you want to export it to. Don't leave it as untitled.fbx. Please don't be disorganized. Name it whatever you want your model to be called. In my case, I finally chose a name and I named the avatar Marley. I'm going to export it, and it's time to move on to the Unity part. Thank you guys for watching. This is just part 1, focusing on purely the Blender portion. Here's a sneak peek of the model. I already have the Unity portion done. I just need to do the editing for it before I can post it. So keep an eye out for part 2. And if you have any questions on part 1, please feel free to ask. I will answer everything I can.